At the anthropology dry lab of the Office of the Medical Investigator.
In those brown bags are bones, DNA samples, waiting to be identified and returned to loved ones.
New Mexico is a big state with a lot of empty places, and there's a lot of possibilities for people to be missing for an extended period of time and decompose. And at that point, a traditional autopsy isn't going to be very helpful because the things that we would look at, like lungs or liver, or those things are gone.
That's where anthropologists come in.
You can think of it as an autopsy of the skeleton. We learn what we can about that individual to figure out how they died, why they died, where they are, and many times who they are. So that's what happens in this lab.
But solving those cases, especially missing and murdered Indigenous women, has had its own set of obstacles.
The issue of missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls is something that hasn't gotten the attention that it needs to get if we're going to break this cycle of violence.
Anthropologists have always studied Native Americans, but they've studied them in the prehistoric past. And that has set up a real disconnect between the Native American community and anthropology, where Native Americans have a lot of really good reasons not to trust anthropologists.
Which means there's not a lot of good data to solve these cases.
All those studies that we've done on prehistoric Native Americans, we don't have any understanding whatsoever of how they relate to contemporary Native Americans. And that's the population that we need to serve.
Senator Martin Heinrich hopes new funding, $374,000 from the feds, can help with gathering more accurate data, so UNM and the Office of the Medical Investigator can improve on the research they've done so far.
UNM, with their background in forensic anthropology, is uniquely poised in the country to help make progress on the issue of missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Our research that we're working on right now is to improve that identification so that when a skeleton comes in, we can do our better job at estimating it to be Native American and hopefully help narrow the pool of missing persons that individual can be compared to and get that body returned to families sooner.
They've already created a research database using information gathered from CT scans.
We're hoping to use this additional funding to bring in machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques that will improve the work we do, allow us to serve more people, serve them faster, to bring more students in who can work on it, to really use cutting-edge technology on big data to solve like really core questions like, who is this person?
The knowledge they gain won't just help New Mexico. It's already being shared around the globe.
So far, we have over 800 users in 50 countries who are using this database to improve research on many different things related to human anatomy.
And with unsolved cases going back as far as the 70s,
we recently had a solved case from 1985 that we were able to return to families.
They're looking forward to bringing more closure to families.
We're asking some Native American scholars who are members of that community but also familiar with public health or science or issues related to missing and murdered Indigenous women to help us advise us, to help us make sure that we're asking questions the community is interested in, that we're doing so in a respectful way, and all of those components as an outsider I wouldn't be able to do by myself.
While it's good news, more resources are being dedicated to solving crimes against missing and murdered Indigenous women.
The funding is absolutely necessary, and it should have happened a long time ago.
Community members and advocates say it's one of many steps that need to be taken.
There needs to be more OMI training for law enforcement, and that should become policy and procedure both for OMI and for different law enforcements.
Darlene Gomez has her own practice.
I started my first case when I was a legal intern, and that was in about 2000 and 2001.
Since then, she's worked with tribal government, the FBI, the courts, even jails.
When we're talking about anthropologists and trying to find old bones, that's just a small step in the overall failure of OMI, and that's not based on OMI themselves. It's about legislation and funding with police officers. So that's where we have to hold our leadership accountable.
The country as a whole needs to really, look after their people, whether the people, your neighbors are from different backgrounds and have different stories, but they're still your neighbors.
You have to remember that each Jane and John Doe, or a person that you have within OMI, has a mother, a father, siblings that love them.
Now, another change Gomez thinks would seriously help includes having a DNA database family members can also access.